Good evening, everyone. My name is Logan, and I'm going to be facilitating this week's discussion on the weekly reading. So I'm going to jump right into it. I'm going to be pretty succinct, so I won't waste too much of your time. I think that in this week's readings, there's an overarching theme of not just knowing our own story through our familiarization with the studies of our people, but also defining who we are ultimately. I began with the video on Herskovitz, and one of the things that stuck out for me was the belief that race and physical attributes corresponded with certain types of behaviors or dispositions. Herskovitz research disproved that myth and that biological inheritance influenced behaviors, but he made a connection uh, to the cultural practices instead, meaning that he felt like our behaviors were influenced by our cultural practices. He theorized that once you diminish differences between blacks and whites, that you would ultimately reduce racism. And he had a very keen interest in African American and African culture. His field studies through his visits to Africa refuted the beliefs that Africa was this large continent that was crying out for colonization. He built an archive of ethnographic evidence that influenced beliefs about the African people. That's one of the things that stood out for me. Then I went on to the reading about Afrocentricity and the American Dream by Lee Baker. And he talks about the movement from desperate poverty to the becoming the largest growth of the black middle class in history. Baker notes that the performance and intellectually elite have made Afrocentricity ubiquitous in public discourse. I couldn't help but to think about the level of engagement that our hip hop artists, our actors, and our activists, some born through social media notoriety, have had in the discourse about racial injustices in our country. They are standing up to the plate and getting more involved, which greatly highlights our struggles for the world. And ultimately, with each discussion about social injustices today and the connection to our history, we are learning more about ourselves while defining who we are for the world as well. So, in light of this call to social advocacy, we see many grassroots organizations are being founded, and a lot of them are taking on heralding the task of bringing to light the challenges that minorities face in the United States and the systems that are in place that are unjust. I find it overwhelmingly true that our place in the world is considered fundamentally important to our perspective and our right and ability to challenge dominant discourses of power. Keith and Pyle, two of the authors, their perspectives reign supreme in that. And my question is, how long will this spirited stance last? How long before we begin to redefine ourselves again, and the discourse changes, or we are at that watershed? Will this be the turning point for our communities? So then Stanley Diamond and Eric Wolf assert that anthropology should be defined as the study of human freedom and liberation of human possibility and necessity, and stresses that human beings not only reflect on cultural events, but synthesize experiences and have the capacity to, sorry, to react in creative and unexpected ways. But I think that we can ultimately define anthropology as a study of our historical context and the cultural interface and interconnection of our experiences and our thoughts. That was my own reflection on it. Karenga talks about the value of Black studies and quotes Mary McLeod Bethune in her discussion about Black studies and its relevance by saying that our mission needs to be discovering the dawn and sharing it with the masses who need it most. For it is by bringing the fruits of knowledge to the masses that we contribute definitely to laying the basis for maximum human freedom and flourishing. So, my next question is, what does Black Studies have to offer in the ongoing quest of the African people to bring forth the best of their history? So that was something I was reflecting on, and then I read the reading by Boyd, the writing by Boyd, sorry. And she spoke about the demonstrations following the death of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., in which students demanded Black Studies curriculum in predominantly white institutions. And Boyd said that she remained indifferent when they failed to acknowledge some of the great literary works of African Americans because she felt like the dream that she was pursuing was beyond cultural conventions at that time. So my third question is, do you believe that the dreams that we are pursuing now are still beyond the limitations of cultural conventions? So those are the three questions that I have. And I'll leave you with one of my favorite African proverbs, and it says that until the lions learn how to write, every story will glorify the hunter. So are we ready to author our own stories?